Will the AFL 2024 grand finalists and the ultimate winner be the best or the worst ever? That's the question I want to ask in this video, because right now we're experiencing a season like no other, really. In most AFL seasons that we've ever seen, certainly in the last 20 to 30 years at the very, very least, certainly my lifetime across 35, we've kind of seen a team that is a clear front runner, a team that has dominated for large chunks of the season and has been deservedly the ultimate premier. Whether we want to talk about, if we get biased, we talk about Geelong in 2007, in 2009 and 11. I mean, sure, there was teams that were positioned high on the ladder, but we were a dominant team that season. We want to talk about season 2022 and how we completely took control of the second half of the year and blew every other team away, right down to a huge grand final victory. If you want to talk about what the Essendon football team of 2000 did, if you want to talk about what Brisbane did across 2001, 2 and 3, if we want to talk about the Hawks three-peat, if we want to talk about the Tigers, we've seen teams year in, year out dominate seasons. And of course, there's been upsets. Unfortunately, Hawthorn 2008. I feel like Sydney fans probably feel a little bit hurt still from 2016 after the Dogs coming from the clouds to get the premiership that year. There's always, occasional little outliers. But I don't think we've seen a season quite like this one where you could throw a blanket over, as things stand, still 12 teams. And I think there are people out there that could make an argument. Some people more insane than others, let's be fair. Some people could make an argument for any one of those 12 teams who are still in the race. And that is absolutely insane. But it does then leave you wondering, will this be the best premier or the worst premier that the AFL's ever seen as a result? So let's bring up the ladder and take a bit of a look at what this season looks like as we stand. Right now, and I'm recording this in a vacuum here, we are going into round 22 this particular week, and that is your top 12 teams. There's obviously a few others on the bottom, but the season is now over for Gold Coast, St Kilda, Adelaide, West Coast, North Melbourne, and Richmond. You cannot play finals at this point in time. And Melbourne are tantalizingly close, as the tipsters, the sports bettors would suggest with those odds. So let's talk about each of these teams. Sydney, they dominated the first half of the season. The first 2/3 maybe, and then the wheels have completely fallen off. You can see their last 5 games. They've got one win from those 5 games. Brisbane started the season abysmally. And most people were kind of, I think at the time, rightly, proven to be incredibly wrong. Rightly, we're questioning, okay, well, this is a team that, we've seen teams kind of lose in grand finals before and then completely fall away. And it felt like Brisbane was potentially going to become that team. They've won out here in the sense that other teams are tripping over themselves everywhere. Every single team that's in this top 8 has tripped over themselves at various different stages, lost games they shouldn't, lost several games that they shouldn't have. And that includes those other 4 teams that are not in the 8 right now, and have allowed the Brisbane Lions to come surging up the ladder. Port, similar sort of story. They've had some really good blocks. They've also had some really, really bad blocks. The Giants, started off pretty well. They had a poor period kind of in that. And sorry, I could be recalling this wrong. So if you're a Giants fan, I'm not trying to offend. I just don't remember the timeline overly well. I think it was maybe rounds 5 through to about 10, 11, where they were a bit patchy and finding form was a real challenge for them. Geelong, we know what we've done. We started out the season on fire. We won the first 7 games, and then we proceeded to win 2 of the next 8. It was a mess. We then won another game of 3, and then we lost against the Dogs. And we've been a bit up and down. There's been serious ebbs and flows when it comes to our form this season. It's not been great. Freo, I'd argue, perhaps been the most consistent, but they've also given up games that they shouldn't have. Western Bulldogs started poorly. We were making calls for Bevo, people making calls for Bevo's head. Now, all of a sudden, I'm tipping them to finish top 4 and to be a serious contender for the flag. Carlton, everyone thought they were the next best behind Sydney when Sydney were up and about, and Carlton was absolutely dominating teams as well. And now the wheels are starting to fall off. They too have won 1 out of their last 5 and are badly, badly out of form and have some injuries. So who knows there? The Bombers, they were up and about. Everyone's going, the Bombers are going to finish top 4 and there might be a chance to win their first final since 2004. That's not looking like it's going to happen. Though, massive credit to them with the win against Freo this past weekend. They came from the clouds. They pinched a hard fought win and give themselves a chance. Hawthorn, they've been in crazy good form. They've lost a couple. They lost to obviously GWS this past weekend, and then to Geelong, in that other loss here 5 weeks ago, back on July 6th. But like they've been in white hot form outside of those two losses. Collingwood, I mean, we were writing them off, and now they've won their last two and are keeping themselves in it. And they beat Carlton this past weekend, and obviously that's a team they're going to be vying for a top 8 spot with at this particular point. All you can do is beat the opposition that's in front of you, and they're giving themselves a chance. And then there's the D's who, as we said, they're 501 to 1 odds right now to steal a spot in the finals. But we know the class that they've got, whether it's Clayton Oliver, whether it's Max Gawn, whether you want to talk about some of their forwards, some of their, May and Lever in defense. They've got really strong players who, if everything just clicks, and I know Christian Petrarca's done, but if everything just clicks, Jack Viney, if something clicks for the Ds, they're dangerous as well. All of these 12 teams, you could make an argument, may it be a very strong one, or one that's slightly lacking. All of these teams could make an argument for being the premiers this year. And so going back to my question of, does this mean that the Premier this year is the best or the worst ever? Well, there's two clear schools of thought, and I've seen little bits of this online. There's been some sentiments expressed by people about who goes on to win this season. And I think the prevailing theory is that, well, they're going to be the worst Premier that we've ever seen because they're not the Essendon of 2000. They're not the Geelong of 2007, 9, 11, 22. They're not the Hawthorn three-peat. They're not the Brisbane three-peat. They're not Richmond. None of the teams here, I mean, I can't think of the last Premier who went into round 22 with a 14-6 or equivalent style record. They were more dominant than that. So does that make the Premier this season worse as a result? And I do understand that sentiment that people are expressing because we are so well drilled on teams that come out and dominate. But the argument could be made is that, well, just the gulf between first and second that year was incredibly wide. Or the wrong team made it to go against Geelong in 2022, for example. And I say that recognizing obviously what Collingwood did the next year, and the Collingwood are absolutely the second best team of 2022. But they found themselves on the wrong side of the draw. They had two close losses against the Cats and the Swans, and their season was done. And the Swans probably used up all their petrol tickets and then got bashed up by us the next week in the grand final. So sometimes that's a factor as well. I think about 2007, for example. And again, similar sort of story. We played the Pies in the prelim, and ultimately that was the best game of the season, I think, in the eyes of many. That prelim final was between the best two teams. But they played in a prelim. Geelong got over the line. Port Adelaide got through with an easy win against North. Geelong bashed them up the next week. We've been pretty fortunate like that. Good stuff. Good work, Geelong. So there's an argument to be made for that side of things where we're talking about the worst Premier because they're not a dominant team. But I think there's also something to be said for the strategy that goes into managing a season to overcome odds. And right now we're talking about 12 teams that could make an argument to be premiers. So to come out on top of those 12, and I'm talking about, when we get to 8, for example, eventually we're going to get to 8 in a few weeks and, to beat, be the best of the top 8. No, we're talking about a top 8 here when the time comes who all could make an argument to win the flag, who, if everything clicks, could win the premiership. And so that there's something to that. And it's harder to quantify because maybe the team that goes on to win the grand final this year gets through by winning all their games by about a goal or two. They're all close. They don't bash up on any teams. They don't expose a team for being well below. They maybe, if we just use the top 8 as it stands right now and assume that as the final ladder and it doesn't change, that maybe Carlton, who's had a few rough weeks, but it all clicks again. They get a couple soldiers back. Charlie Curnow stops stinking it up and stops relying on free kicks. Harry Mackay recovers from his concussion, and Paddy Cripps continues to do Paddy Cripps things. Sam Walsh is back. I don't know, somehow miraculously reforms into something that's not going to break on him with every game he plays. And all of a sudden, They come surging through, everything fires on all cylinders, and they win the premiership. And I think there's something to be said for what you've got to do to overcome all the hurdles and win that flag. Again, it's a bit like the Dogs of 2016 in some ways, where no one would have tipped them. They barely made the finals. They scraped in by the skin of their teeth and then did something miraculous, but comprehensive at the same time. I think about that matchup against the Giants and how incredible that was, and then what they ultimately did in the grand final. It was something extraordinary, and I don't think anyone will. I mean, outside of it was the theater was incredible. The story of obviously the Dogs with how long it had been was incredible. There's obviously some theatrics around it as well, but ultimately, it was a sensational finals campaign from the Dogs, and I think the team that wins the premiership this year is going to do so because they've compiled a fantastic finals campaign, and that planning for finals has been going on for weeks. If I now just lock in on all Geelong related things, we've been managing our players for a long, long time to get them where they need to be. Zach Tui is basically 1 in, 1 out at this point. We've had Reece Stanley out for weeks and weeks and weeks. I presume to get him a little bit hungry, and we saw some hunger in him this weekend. It was great. Jed Buse has been out for the entire season, has now been back for the last 2, and has done a great job. Tom Hawkins is set to come back now. Obviously, he was layover due to injury, but he was getting managed through the season as well. He's going to come back with a game or 2 to go potentially and be cherry ripe again with then a week off before the final starts. There's reason to believe that the Cats, just like any other team, can get the job done this year because they're managing their team. And I think the team that wins the premiership this year manages their season the best. And that, I think, for me, carries a lot of weight. That doesn't diminish the efforts of the team that dominates. Again, Geelong has been one of those teams that's dominated their finals campaigns, dominated the grand final and won. And it's been a spectacular performance from an incredible team. The main thing that I want to stress here is that if you're the 2024 Premier this year and it's a slog, that doesn't make you the worst Premier we've ever seen. It may not make you the best. We've seen better teams go on to win the premiership. But it'll be a really honourable, respected Premier, I think, that we get this year. They deserve to be. To get over everything that's going on, they deserve to be. And so and also, as a consumer of football, it is going to be a riveting final series. I don't want it. There's not a single game. If this is our top 8 right now, and there is the possibility of change, Hawthorn is coming, Essendon's giving themselves a chance, the Pies are coming, the D's, who knows. If this is our top 8, there's not a single matchup there that I don't want to see. Sydney v. the Giants, Battle of the Bridge. Brisbane v. Port, there's history there. Both teams are up and about at the moment. Cats and Blues, we've won all so far this season. And obviously I've got a bias for the Cats. Freo and the Dogs are on fire at the moment. And the Dockers not doing much worse than the Dogs right now. Everything is looking good for every single one of these teams. And so I can't wait to see it. And football will be a must-watch thing throughout the entirety of September. Anyway, that's where we'll wrap things up. Let me know what you think about the Premier of 2024. Will they be the best, the worst, or somewhere in between when it comes to Premiers? And I'm not talking about based on margins. I'm talking about the mountain that they must overcome, the ebbs and flows of the season, the hurdles they've had to contend with. Who would be, in your eyes, the best team to win the premiership this year? As in the best Premier, have the best story, or puts forward the best argument right now? Who would potentially put up the worst argument right now? Let me know in the comments what you think. Hit us up on the Hoops Crew at socials, myself at Paul James Games. Check out the Patreon where you can get exclusive access to stuff for a week for $0, but then for the cost of $5 or $6 for the entire month, that is the cost of one coffee. You'll get all of our Patreon exclusive content as well as the early access that goes with that. Cats fans, neutrals who are watching, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I've stirred up a conversation that you can take with you here and kind of discuss with others. Best or worst Premier of all time? Where do we fit in the spectrum? Who's it going to be? Thanks a lot for watching. Remain Geelong strong, and I'll see you later.